Great, thank you, Pete. Good afternoon. I think we're just now. Great to be here back in the east of England. I'm normally coming to Norwich to support my team play the Canaries. I won't talk about my football allegiances. But I was in the area for a holiday in Suffolk in May. Great little place we found there called Leatheringham Watermill, which some of you might know. And we go out walking. We take our dog with us on holiday, and we get out into the Suffolk coast and heaths, and we go to Orford and Aldborough, and an area of the country we love holidaying in. So it's great to be back in the east of England today. Thank you for inviting me, Pete. Just a little bit about me first and foremost. I'll introduce Visit England, Visit Britain shortly. My role there is Head of Business Support, but as part of that role, I specialise in accessible and inclusive tourism, and have done for about the last 15 years. So today I want to give you lots of practical tips and ideas on how you and your tourism businesses can be more welcoming and inclusive to not just disabled people, but anyone with an accessibility requirement. So the work we do, I lead at Visit England in this space, is about giving lots of guidance to industry, developing lots of toolkits. We have a stakeholder group that meet quarterly who are looking to drive forward the government ambition, which we'll have a look at in a minute, around accessible tourism. And as Pete mentioned, I have a aligned role to be one of the disability and access ambassadors for the Cabinet Office. So there's one per key sector of the economy. So there's one in banking, there's one in retail, and in the sectors for tourism, we've got one for airports, hospitality, rail, heritage, countryside and built environment, and I currently have the hat for tourism. So very much banging the drum nationally across England for this important topic. A little bit about Visit England, Visit Britain. So we're the National Tourism Agency. We are funded, we're a non-departmental public body funded by the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. And our purpose is all about driving a thriving tourism industry in England and across Britain. So there's two sides to our organisation that you're probably familiar with. The Visit Britain side is mainly responsible for marketing all of the nations and regions of Britain overseas, so driving that inbound tourism. And then I sit within the Visit England side of the organisation, and we are leading domestic tourism and supporting the development of tourism destinations and product within England specifically. And it really is a key part of our role to facilitate a more accessible and inclusive tourism industry. And I mentioned that there is a government ambition in this space that was first published before COVID and has since been repeated in the Tourism Recovery Plan. And it's for the whole of the UK to become the most accessible tourism destination in Europe. And the date for that set pre-COVID was 2025. Now we're on a journey towards that. We lost a couple of years battling COVID within the sector. But really, we have to look at the competition internationally. And a lot of countries are doing good work now on accessible tourism, whether it's Germany, Portugal, Spain, Belgium have done a lot for years, and now Ireland, closer to home, are doing a lot on accessible tourism as well. So, it's a competitive part of tourism. So just to bring us all onto the same page first and foremost, who are we talking about when we're looking at accessible tourism? So I'm going to do a quick exercise, if we can. I'd like to ask all of those that are willing and able to please stand up, otherwise just raise your hand. Just roll with me on this one if you can. Okay, so I want you to think about a family member, a friend, or a close acquaintance, maybe a colleague, and I want you to sit down or lower your hand if you know of any friend or acquaintance that uses a wheelchair. And if you have any acquaintances who are registered blind, if you could sit down. Or how about a family member who has hearing loss? Or a friend, family member, please sit down. Or maybe someone that has a social communication impairment, such as an autism spectrum condition. There's a few left standing. How about a mobility impairment, but a non-wheelchair user, so someone who just needs a little bit more support with their mobility and moving around? How about a family member or friend who has dementia? think we have one person standing. And lastly, really, anyone who has a learning disability or a long-term illness or health condition that may affect their day-to-day activities. And everyone sat down. So, it's a simple exercise, but the point that it's making is that disability touches all of our lives. It's not that unknown topic that affects other people. It affects us and it affects our friends and family and acquaintances. So I hope that brings it a little bit closer to home. And I'd ask you to just hold in mind throughout the rest of my presentation, one of the friends or family members that you thought about with an impairment and think about them when we're talking about the importance of accessibility. So officially, following the government's definition of disability, 1 in 4 of the UK population is disabled. That's about 16 million people. The significance of that to us in the tourism industry is that it very much may affect where those people choose to stay and visit for their holidays. A lot of disability is hidden or unseen, and really people with access requirements goes beyond the 1 in 4. This is just those that meet that official definition. So as a tourism business, we need to be really aware of the spending power and the influence of disabled people, which we'll look at more in the coming presentation. Now, the international symbol of disability is a wheelchair. We're all used to seeing the wheelchair logo to depict accessibility, whether it's a toilet or a parking space. But actually, it's estimated that only around 7% of disabled people use a wheelchair. But it's often what our minds skip to the most because it's a very visible indication of disability. So your business might be able to meet the needs of wheelchair users, but in some instances it might be a bit difficult if you've got a listed bed and breakfast with both bedrooms on the first floor, for example. So if that's the case, I'd ask you to think about the other 93% and what you can do to help them, and we'll give you some tips and ideas. So beyond wheelchair users, who else has accessibility requirements? Well, people with different sensory impairments, whether that's different degrees of sight loss, different degrees of hearing loss very much correlated with age as well. So, many of us all know an older grandparent or family member that's affected by hearing loss. Physical and mobility impairment, that can affect such a broad group of people. People that just need a little bit more kind of support, places to sit. Dementia, we're learning a lot more about people with dementia. It's touching a lot more of our lives, and we've worked with the Alzheimer's Society to produce guidance for tourism businesses on, being a more dementia-friendly tourism businesses, because people with dementia still want to travel. They still want to come away on holiday, like all of us. We spoke earlier about social communication impairments, so not just people with autism, but anyone that is neurodiverse, and we're learning a lot more. You're probably reading a lot more about neurodiversity nowadays as well. But accessibility can benefit a broader group that you might not have thought about. People with dietary requirements, older people in general will benefit from a more accessible environment. Families with younger children benefit. So really, it's not taking away, it's adding to the experience for all of your customers and visitors. Lots of people, though, don't see themselves as disabled, and that's really important. Lots of people have accessibility requirements, but might not identify as being a disabled person. This is probably the only chart I'll show you, you'll be pleased to hear, but this is research we did last year, which I think is really important, and it's on accommodation choices. And this is the percentage of respondents with different types of impairment saying that their condition has an impact on where they choose to stay in the accommodation for the holiday. Unsurprisingly, your full-time wheelchair users right up there, 96% of that group, say it has a big impact on where they're choosing to stay. But actually, even going down to the bottom here, it's still 55%. In the middle, you're looking at people who have vision impairment, blind people. 69% of blind people say their accommodation choice is affected by their impairment, and so on. So, really important, and lots of people have a mix of impairments, not just one. Building on that, it's actually very unique when someone travels, that their own requirements are very unique. And let's look at why. So each disabled individual typically has more than one condition. So it's not just, one from the slide that we saw, it's often two or more. The average trip party that includes a disabled person has 2 or 3 different conditions to consider, because there's often more than just one person in the group that has an accessibility requirement. And also, people with the same impairment often have different accessibility requirements. So if you think of motor neurone disease, for example, where someone could be with their journey with M&D could be very different to someone else, and their access requirements therefore can differ. So we can't make assumptions as to, okay, if you have motor neurone disease, I need to offer you X, Y, Z. It needs to be a very individual approach, and you need to be led by the person as to what will help their visit, their stay, more welcoming and better for them. So summing up there, that the requirements for each booking is very unique, and we should treat it that way. I find this quite a sobering thought, really, and this is from a contact in the US. He says that on average, a person will spend 8 years disabled in their lifetime. So, if it doesn't include you right now, at one point in your lifetime, disability will probably be quite close to home. So it's, as I say, quite a sobering thought. And also borrowed from John, I really like this. This is what he calls the accessible tourist profile. So some traits of travellers with access requirements, very typically influenced by previous bad experiences. Unfortunately, not just our tourism industry, but tourism destinations across the world, they're not fully built and set up yet to offer excellent, inclusive, accessible experiences. It's not the norm. We want to try and get closer to that being the norm, but it isn't the norm at the moment. So bad travel experiences are happening for this group all the time, and that can understandably influence their future travel. It can mean that they become very skeptical when something is described as accessible, because a lot of the time it's put onto websites with the right intentions, we're fully accessible. But actually, what does that mean for me as an individual? Okay, so for example, I'm a wheelchair user. Does that mean that all the doorways are going to meet the width of my particular wheelchair? Does it mean that all the grab rails are going to be at the right height for me? So they can't make these assumptions, so they are skeptical when something is just broadly described as accessible without the detail. So you can see that people can become quite anxious that their accessibility needs won't be met. And actually, it can lead to a lot of people not taking a trip, whether it be to the east of England or to other parts of England, because they're just too concerned about the risk of turning up and it not meeting their access requirements. We talk about the visitor journey in tourism quite a lot. The guest, the visitor, has to be able to travel to your destination. They have to be able to have accessible accommodation. They have to be able to get out of the accommodation and enjoy all the things to do in the destination, visit the attractions, eat in the restaurants, get out into the countryside, and then travel home again. And if any part of that trip doesn't work for their access requirements, that's going to have a major impact on their holiday. But the good news is that this group are really loyal, very loyal to companies who meet their access requirements and can really help you to build your reputation, and we'll look at that in more detail. So we'll go on to that now, a bit more of the why. Why is this market relevant to you as a tourism business and destination? The Valuable 500 are an organisation driving a lot of thought leadership in this space. And globally, it's less than the UK. They say leaving out 16% of the world's population should be considered a material risk for all businesses. But we've seen that that's about 24-25% in the UK. And most of you will be driving tourism domestically more than inbound, I'd imagine. These figures will be updated over the next couple of months. Pete's alluded to it. So this is pre-COVID. And really the point here is that this is not a niche market. I think we've seen how many people have access requirements. When we look at the value, and this is actual spend reported through the main tourism surveys, £15.3 billion. That's actually in England each year alone by tourism trips that include someone with an access requirement and the spend of their entire party. About 20% of day visits made up of this group, 15% of domestic overnights, but only 2% of inbound tourism trips are by people with access requirements. 16% of the world's population have an impairment, but only 2% of our visitors inbound have it. So, you know, there's a lot of potential to build the market in this space. You might have heard of a great little charity called Tourism for All. I borrowed this for them. I really like this. It will help you to build what they call the 3 R's. Undoubtedly your revenue, because we just touched on what a valuable market it is. If you attract the spend of the disabled person, you're attracting the spend of their entire group. But the perverse is true. You know, if your tourism experience or accommodation is not able to meet the disabled person's needs, you're losing the spend of the entire party because they're going to go and stay somewhere else. Resilience. You know, heard a lot about resilience coming out of the COVID pandemic. This is a loyal market, strong repeat business, and it means that they stay longer because of the effort that goes into planning a trip. They don't follow the norm of taking lots of short trips. They tend to take fewer longer trips. So their spend is therefore higher across their trip duration. Sometimes, anecdotally, they're not tied to the peak periods as much. Actually, a lot of people in this market don't want to be traveling at the busiest time. They want it to be a bit quieter, to have a little bit more breathing space, a bit more room. So they can help you extend your trading season and the impact of that seasonality. And then reputation. I see this all the time from businesses. It's very true that if you understand your customer's individual needs, you provide that warm welcome to everyone, you will get customers talking about you very positively. There are lots of social media groups. One of them is Accessible Domestic Day Trips and Holidays. It has over 21,000 people in it. I'm in that group and I see the word of mouth. I see how many recommendations are being made daily from disabled parents, disabled people, saying, I've just stayed here. It was absolutely fantastic. And they're talking about places like Watatunga and Church Farm. So really helps your reputation. And this is just putting a stat behind the return factor. 1 in 4 return to accommodation they visited before. Now that's either because the accommodation has specialist facilities that are needed, and equally, sometimes it's because it's removing the stress and the effort of having to try and research and find information on a new destination. There's a really strong return on investment. I could give you lots of different case studies, but I picked this one from Hotel Brooklyn. This is part of the Bespoke Hotels collection, and their president has access requirements, and he's really driving the brand to be really accessible and inclusive. So in their new hotel opening a couple of years ago now in Manchester, they made sure that they worked with an accessible design company to make sure that their accessible bedrooms were as attractive as possible. And what this is doing is driving extra revenue into the hotel. So actually, those rooms are not the least occupied, which sometimes in the past they may have been if they were very medical looking. Now they've created really attractive rooms which work for everyone. So in a way, you're broadening the appeal of that room. So it's not exclusively for disabled people, it's inclusively for everyone. So those rooms are driving £132,000 more revenue a year compared to a non-accessible room. And they're winning lots of event bookings. Now that's where the real revenue can come in. So they've got the accommodation that goes alongside an accessible event space. They can win event bookings. All you need is one member of a wedding party. Maybe it's the groom's mum or the bride's dad or something, to have an access requirement, and that will dictate where they spend £20,000, £30,000 worth of wedding revenue. So there's lots of money to, you shouldn't be ashamed to talk about the financial return from what we call the purple pound. So yeah, 85,000 came from events, given 217 in total in its first year, extra revenue. And they call these rooms their Liberty rooms, which is quite a nice spin on it. It's not the disabled room, it's a Liberty room. Liberty suites they have as well. Oh, and you can see here, they've done something really cool. So this is a ceiling tracked hoist, very rarely available in hotels in the UK. You might have seen some press articles suggesting there's only maybe 20 places that have fixed ceiling tracked hoists. They provide really good independence for people to travel because It only needs one carer as opposed to a mobile hoist that safely needs two carers to use it. But here they've done a design feature. So the track is actually a lighting feature. So you wouldn't know it doubles up as a track for a hoist. And the hoist tucks back into that little cupboard up over the nightstand there. So, you don't have to have the impact of medical looking equipment, but it's there if you need it. So just to sum up this section, in a nutshell, I like to say that the business case for accessible tourism is that it's helping businesses to stay legal, and we haven't spoke about the legal obligations, but the Equality Act is there. It helps you to make more money. Most of you are private operations. That's important. And importantly, ethically, socially, it feels good by doing the right thing. The actual feedback that operators have from disabled people and the difference that their accommodation or their attractions are making to people feel included and have great holiday experiences can sometimes bring operators to tears. So it's really positive, feel-good work as well. Okay, so a bit more about what and how. What exactly is accessible tourism and how do you engage? We say at Visit England, think broadly. Tourism experiences that can be enjoyed by people with not just physical impairments, but sensory and cognitive impairments, but anyone else who has an accessibility requirement, whether they see themselves as being disabled or not. Any business or destination needs to look at 3 core areas, and we're adding on a 4th if you employ staff as well. So the 3 areas that you must look at is the customer, which is all about the welcome. So the welcome that you and your staff, if you employ any staff, are giving to people. So are you disability confident? That's a term we see in training quite a lot. So if a disabled person comes into your business, do you freeze and think, what's the right language to use here? I'm not really sure. Or have you had training? Do you feel confident and comfortable to speak to disabled people, understand their individual needs, and give them that warm welcome? Often we think about the second pillar the most, place. People think about door width and ramps and gradients of ramps and all the real physical things which could get expensive as well. The built environment is important, but most of you are working within existing properties and might be limited. But you can build it into renovation plans and conversion plans if you have them in the future. And there's always some quick wins, low or no cost things that you can do to improve your physical environment. And then the information. I think the information is the easiest, and we're going to have a look at that shortly in the presentation. Everyone here can provide accurate and detailed information on your accessibility. You shouldn't wait until you feel you've got a fully accessible product, because that's a bit of a misnomer. We're all on a journey on accessibility like we are on sustainability and everything else we're working on our businesses. You'll never reach the end of that journey. People need the information now. You can update the information as your products and services improve, but get information out there. If you employ staff, there are loads of benefits of employing disabled people. Because if you're bringing disabled people into your team, you're bringing their lived experience, and also you're bringing a lot of credibility for your customers which have disabilities as well. Then thinking more widely for the destination, so I know we've got some DMOs, we've got local authorities in the room today. Really important that the public realm and the transport backs up what your businesses are doing in their venues. I mentioned that physical barriers are often what people get worried about. Understanding and empathy, whilst it can't remove the physical barriers that you may have in your premises, it can go a really long way to mitigating them. So for some people, maybe not full-time wheelchair users, but some people with more lower level kind of requirements, they can overcome a few little hurdles with the physical accessibility. If you're providing a really warm welcome, then that's going to make up for it. So information is really key. When this group are booking or planning a journey, they're researching the facts and also some opinions to inform their personal choice on suitability. So they're thinking about features, accessibility features in your venues, rather than looking to see whether you've badged your property or your premises as being particularly suitable for a type of disability. They want the features information. So you should be aware of that and help to provide this kind of information on your websites and in your marketing. It's really important that you don't make assumptions and prescribe as to who your business is and isn't accessible for. I can see why that might feel a sensible thing to do, but actually empowering people is about giving them the information and then letting them make their conclusion, because remember, we don't know how their condition affects them day to day. So we're looking for venues to describe accessibility factually. That empowers people to make those personal choices and be able to come and travel and stay with you. These are some really typical quotes. These are real quotes that we hear from disabled travellers. Don't tell me what I want, tell me what you have and I'll make my decision. And a very common refrain, if I don't know, I don't go. So we're going to do a really quick exercise here. I don't know whether people have got onto the Wi-Fi yet. If not, maybe have a look whether you've got any mobile signal. It's quite a rare thing for a presenter to say to get your smartphones out. Don't go into your emails. If you could just leave that for another 10, 15 minutes, that would be great. But if you get out your smartphone, the quick exercise here, give you the background. A survey by the charity Ewan's Guide found that 91% of people with access requirements are trying to find disabled access information before they visit somewhere for the first time. 85% are checking the venue's website. 72% have found information to be misleading, confusing, or inaccurate. And 58% say they avoid going to a venue if it's not shared its disabled access information, because they then assume that your venue isn't accessible to them. So what I want you to do is open your website's homepage. If you're a destination, you might want to open up the DMO's consumer website. So get onto your homepage of your business. I'm not going to give you too long on this one. Now, what I want you to do is to locate accessibility information. What I don't mean is information about the technical accessibility of the website. Sometimes that's in the footer. I'm talking about information that says we welcome disabled people, we've got these facilities, etc., etc. Find that information. Okay, raise your hand if you found that information on your website. Okay, and everyone else just stop. So we've got probably about 8 to 10 people in the whole room that's found it by now. Not many people. But have you found information on sustainability? Information on your green credentials? Maybe you found information on being dog-friendly and welcoming dogs. If you found information on welcoming dogs and not found information on welcoming disabled people, I'd suggest you've got a little bit of work to do when you leave the room today. So the message I'm clearly getting across is that this is sought after information. If it's not there, you're losing business. You don't know you're losing that business. They've already moved on to one of your competitors. So you need to get that information up there, and it needs to be prominent, so not hidden in the footer of your website. Have a go-to page. Word it around accessibility and access for all. Don't couch it in disability, because remember that lots of people with access requirements don't relate to the terminology of disability. My granddad had hearing loss. He would never put himself in the box of being disabled. If he saw disabled information on your website, he wouldn't click it. But he would benefit from the information on that page. So let's broaden our language up. Try and avoid any ambiguous claims. You know, if you read anything on there that says we're fully accessible, that's very misleading and not helpful for people. We need the detail behind that. Are there photos? Are there videos? Is the photos of disabled people on your website so they can relate to it? Is there a link to your accessibility guide on there as well, where you give that detailed information? I'm not going to read all of these out, so we're going to go on in a minute and just look at the guidance that Visit England has available freely for you after today to help you to go on a journey with your accessibility. And included in part of that guidance is going to be top 20 tips, and some of them are on here. And they relate to those 3 pillars of accessibility, so the customer, the information, and the place. So we've been working over the last 10 months with suppliers to produce new toolkits. It's going to consolidate a lot of standalone guidance that we had that some of you may have read, the Dementia-Friendly Tourism Guide, the Autism-Friendly Tourism Guide. It's consolidating them all into one toolkit with lots of practical tips and real-life examples from around England. So lots of case studies from businesses like yours so that you can learn best practice. The business toolkit follows the 4 pillars and has real-life case studies, as I say. It also includes actionable checklists, so you can actually have a live document where you're planning your actions. They don't all have, no one's saying you have to do all of this by this point. It's for you to build into your business plans. And it's available now on the Visit England and Visit Britain industry website, which went live last week or the week before, our new website. What we've got there at the moment is the main toolkit with the case studies and the action checklists, and then by the end of November you'll see the top 20 tips appear, and also some technical guidance that replaces our National Accessible Scheme standards for those instances where you are doing a renovation or a conversion or maybe a new build. That's when the technical guidance comes into play. So 4 elements to this toolkit, really a big piece of guidance for you available freely on our industry website. And I just want to give a shout out to some work that's going on specifically in Suffolk, and it's led by the Suffolk Growth Partnership, and a shout out to Richard Hunt, who's been leading this work. Accessible Destination Suffolk. So it started with a review of accessibility and a workshop, which I spoke at last year, and a publication of a really great report on access and inclusion and ideas and plans on how that can really come to fruition in Suffolk. So the Suffolk Visitor Economy Strategic Group is developing an action plan on how to be an accessible and inclusive destination in Suffolk. There's a launch event taking place on the 16th of November. It's an open invitation, so anyone can sign up. You don't have to be tightly within the confines of Suffolk either. I think everyone's welcome. And it's going to kickstart some really good initiatives in Suffolk. So they're going to be working with Access Able, who is a provider of accessibility guides, and making 100 detailed access guides for your venues available on the Access Able website. They're going to be providing, through that partnership, Disability Essentials training to give you some of that important welcome training. And then, as I say, it's really acting as a further call to action for all stakeholders to work collectively on this objective. So finally, before I just ask whether there's any questions, this is a quick reminder to say that Visit England on our new industry website has the Business Advice Hub. It contains much more guidance than accessibility. It covers all of your legislative requirements in the Pink Book. It covers sustainability tips. Fire risk assessment is very relevant for accommodation because the law changed on the 1st of October. So we've had an increase of 800% of downloads of our fire risk assessment template. Loads of guides on digital marketing, information on the Visit England Awards, which the Visit East of England Awards feed into, Taking England to the World, TXGB, and much more. So do check out the Business Advice Hub.